My 3 little ones were all waving, 2 of them even jumping and screaming as I approached the gangplank. I pretended to be surprised when I saw Steve, and our kids put their hands to their faces and let out a playful gasp. "What are you doing here?" "Surprise, Mommy?" Steve said with an enigmatic smile. "We thought we'd come down to see you off. Where's Edna?" I grinned at Steve. "I think she's already said yes." We figured it was better not to try to meet in all this chaos. The kids were bursting with excitement, clamoring for my attention. They were all talking at once, so I crouched down and hugged little Trixie. At 3 years old, she was just out of diapers, but still had the chubby arms and legs of a toddler. Like her older sister, she was a chatterbox, and her lisp was just too cute. "Are you going on the big boat?" she asked with her big blue eyes. "Yes, I am." "What will you do on the big boat?" "Well, there are swim movies, a gym, and coffee shops, so I'm going to keep busy." "I want to go on a cruise with you, Mommy." "Well, not this one, but maybe we can go on a family cruise someday." "Okay, how long will you be gone, Mommy?" Kathy had grown tall and thin, but she used to look just like Trixie. Like Trixie and Steve. Her hair was almost white. We all loved to be outside, and the summer sun bleached her hair completely, while my dark hair was only lightened a little with a few highlights, but my deep tan made up for it. "I'll be gone for 5 days and 4 nights, so I'll be back Friday afternoon." I told her that Kathy's lower lip was sticking out in a cute pout. I kissed her nose and reassured her. "Don't worry, sweetie, it'll go by so fast. You won't even know I'm gone. We're going to miss you." Mommy said Charlie was my little guy at 8. He looked just like me, but his serious, hard-working personality was all Steve. I worried sometimes. He didn't know how to have fun, but I knew he would always be dependable. "I'll miss you too, but Daddy will be here with you. He'll take good care of you," I assured him. "I know," Charlie replied, "but we want you home too. I just love you all so much," I said, pulling them into a big hug. Trixie and Kathy wriggled and giggled while Charlie remained perfectly still, and "I'll be back before you know it." I stood up and grabbed my rolling suitcase. My other suitcase was already on the ship. I turned to kiss Steve, but he was gone. I looked around and didn't see him anywhere. "Children, have you seen your father?" They looked around in confusion, but they were small. They couldn't see much. I quickly scanned the crowd but couldn't see him. I checked my watch. I realized I only had 5 minutes to get on the plane. I tried calling his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. He must be busy with someone. "Steve, where are you? Do I have to board the ship? Please come back quickly." The kids looked worried, so I gave them a reassuring smile. "I bet he just went to the bathroom. He'll be back soon." "What are you going to do with Daddy?" "We're going to the pool while I'm gone." Trixie beamed with excitement at the water in our neighborhood pool. "Daddy said we could have dinner at McDonald's one night." "Oh, really? Just make sure it's just one night." "Okay." I joked with Kathy, who laughed and twirled around. "We're going to play miniature golf tomorrow night." "I think you're going to beat Dad again, Charlie." "I think he will let me win." His serious tone made my heart ache a little. My little boy was growing up. "You still have to make your shots," I reminded him, echoing Steve's advice. "As long as you do your part, it doesn't matter what Dad does." Charlie smiled a little, which made me feel a little better. I hugged him and then got up to look for Steve. Just then, I noticed 2 crew members panicking as they started to remove the gang plan. I ran over to them, making sure my kids were still in sight. "Excuse me, I have my boarding pass, but my husband went to the bathroom and hasn't returned. I can't leave my children. Could you please wait a few more minutes?" The younger crew member looked uncertain and turned to his supervisor. "We can wait another minute, but that's all we can do." "Thank you," I replied. I tried calling Steve again, but I only got his voicemail. "Steve, I'm going to miss my boarding." I tried calling him again, but again no answer. I shrugged to the crew. "I'm sure he'll be back any minute. He knows I have to board." "I'm sorry, ma'am. We have to go now?" Frustrated, I quickly texted Miss the boat as I walked back to my kids. I called Steve again. "Great, Steve, I missed the boat. I can't believe you're leaving me here. You better have a good reason." I watched sadly as the ship pulled away. There goes my vacation. My phone vibrated with a text message. "Oh no, what happened?" I answered quickly later. Right now my children needed me. I gathered them and took them to a shady bench to wait for Steve. "Not today, honey, why not?" "Your daddy had to go somewhere, and I didn't want to leave you alone." I wasn't in the mood to cover for Steve right now. He'd been acting kind of rude lately. He'd been working late several nights, and although he tried to pay attention to the kids, he seemed distant. When we were alone, he barely spoke to me. Instead of spending time with us like he usually did in the evenings, he'd go to Tony's bar or work in the yard until dark, and he was checking his phone more than usual. One morning I got curious and checked who he was texting, only to find out he'd set a password on his phone. Was he cheating on me? The thought scared me, but it couldn't be true. Not Steve. He was so trustworthy, but something had changed, and now this nonsense. He knew how much. I had been looking forward to this cruise. A little break from the endless demands of being a mother, wife, employee, daughter, and all the other roles I played. 5 days alone didn't seem like too much to ask for, and when I mentioned the idea in April, he was excited about it, but he orchestrated this surprise. Fortunately, Kathy wasn't very good at keeping secrets, and then she disappeared. I was more than a little upset with my husband. Where was he? We waited in the shade for almost 30 minutes, and by then, I had completely run out of things to keep them occupied. Trixie was getting cranky, and Kathy was right there with her. I tried calling Steve several times, but it always went to voicemail. My irritation was growing and my concern was growing as the minutes ticked by. Where could he be? I didn't want to upset the kids, so I kept asking them questions and making up silly games. But even children have their limits, and we were way past theirs. Getting them home was going to be tricky, and Uber had dropped me off, and I didn't know where Steve had parked his car. I checked my bag, but I didn't have his car keys anyway, so I requested another Uber to take us home. We'd have to risk it without Trix's car seat, but it wasn't a long ride. The driver didn't seem to mind, but I insisted we stick to surface streets. After waiting 10 minutes for the ride and another 15 for the drive, we arrived at our little rancher. I called Steve on the way. "Honey, please call me and let me know you're okay. I'm starting to worry. I'm taking the kids home, so get there as soon as you can." Steve's car wasn't in sight, but he might have parked it in the garage if he was home. He wasn't. The kids were grumpy, but calmer when I got them inside and put Trixie down for a nap. She usually only slept every other night, but I hoped today's excitement would tire her out more than usual. Kathy went straight to the TV and found a Disney show, while Charlie went to his room and closed the door. I took my rolling bag into our bedroom and left it there while I went to the bathroom. I sent a text while I was on the toilet. Sorry, Steven's kid showed up. He left, couldn't leave the kids. I finished and flushed. I understand. I replied with my own sad face. Emoji then went into the kitchen to get a snack and some iced tea. I didn't notice her at first, but as I sat at the dining room table thinking about where my husband might have gone, my heart sank. Steve had placed his cell phone in its distinctive silver case in the middle of the table. I knew it was Steve because it was perfectly aligned with the edges of the table. He had an eye for detail and symmetry that was essential to his job as a high-end painter, but what shook me was his wedding ring sitting on the dark screen of the phone. Damn it! I went into our bedroom and noticed that most of his clothes were gone. His tablet was missing from the nightstand, and when I checked the den, I saw his laptop and all of our files were gone too. It seemed like my marriage was over. Tears streamed down my face, even though I knew it wouldn't change anything, but deep down I knew I had hurt Steve deeply. He wasn't one to avoid confrontation unless it would break him, and despite my mistakes, I loved him deeply. Steve was an incredible man. He was an amazing lover and a reliable partner who put my needs before his throughout our 11 years together, 9 of them as husband and wife. He could be stubborn and overly focused on his work at times, but I still got my way most of the time. I could be impulsive and hot-tempered, but he was always calm and steady, which balanced me out. That was something I really needed, especially before we had kids. He was exceptional in his craft. His painting business flourished because he combined creativity with responsibility, and now he had a waiting list thanks to referrals from his satisfied clients, and he excelled as a father. He cherished each of our children, and though his patience wasn't infinite, it was close, and now he was gone. So why did I try to escape on a cruise with Chad Mayberry? I worked as a dental assistant because it allowed me to be home by 2 when the kids got out of school or daycare. About 10 months ago, a new dentist joined our office. During this time, Trixie was going through her terrible 2s, and Kathy was adjusting to pre-kindergarten. Trixie was especially clingy, and while Charlie was more independent, he still needed a lot of attention. It felt like the demands never stopped. Steve's job wasn't all-consuming, but he often came home tired and distracted. He made an effort with the kids, but by the time they were in bed, he was exhausted, and so was I. We tried to make time for each other, but it was hard. Our once-a-month Saturday night dates felt inadequate, Friday night intimacy felt obligatory, and spontaneity was a thing of the past, even though we had worked hard to achieve our current life. It felt draining, and while I didn't blame Steve or the kids, I was frustrated with our lifestyle. I wasn't ready to settle into a completely predictable life. Like my parents, Chad was married, but they didn't have children. Their lifestyle seemed more independent, and since they both had professional jobs, Sylvia worked in its sales. They could afford frequent travel and exciting vacations. They often went on solo adventures. The first time I talked to Chad was after he came back from rafting the Grand Canyon with his college buddies. Sylvia was on her way to Santa Fe for an art show with her best friend. Chad had a great sense of humor and liked to tease everyone, including me. Since I usually skipped lunch due to my part-time schedule, he joined me in the kitchen for a mid-morning snack. I often complained about my family because I felt they took me for granted. I admired Chad's carefree lifestyle, extra money, and fewer responsibilities. Leighton should skip work tomorrow, he suggested with a grin. We can go to the beach for lunch and be back in time for you to pick up the kids. So we did. It was a refreshing break from my usual routine. We had grown-up conversations with no strings attached. I didn't have to repeat myself, and I only had to worry about cleaning up after myself. Chad drove so I could relax and the restaurant staff took care of us. I appreciated the break, and that night with my family felt like the best in a long time. Steve noticed my happiness, and we had midweek intimacy for the first time in months. I felt so connected to him, almost moved to tears by my love for him. Chad suggested we meet for lunch again a few weeks later, and it became a regular thing. Usually we'd grab a quick bite and chat in the park, but on days when we had more time, we'd venture a little farther. I can't blame Chad for seducing me. It was my decision to open that door. He may have walked through it, but we both played a part. One day at lunch he brought up Steve. I think I spend more time alone with you than with him. I wonder if he misses me. That would be a shame. He looked at my chest. You're quite charming. I blushed. Well, you have your own allure. I smiled and raised an eyebrow, and just like that, the subject of closeness was out of the question. Our banter became more suggestive, and I began to see Chad in a different light. He had a refined good looks. Steve was more rugged, tall, and muscular, with intense blue eyes and rough hands. Chad, on the other hand, was smaller, slender, and darker. I often watched his deft hands at dental work and wondered what else they could do. We met for lunch once, sometimes twice a week, until one day. We both had some free time due to canceled appointments and wanted to go to the beach. He asked with a grin, sure we were going to the beach instead of our usual spot. Chad drove us to a motel on the shore. I've been wanting some alone time with you, he said, his eyes full of desire, and I felt a rush, knowing he wanted me. We had about an hour and a half, which felt just right, not rushed. Surprisingly, I didn't feel guilty. The time with Chad was like a break from reality for me. It didn't affect my marriage. It just relieved some stress. I loved Steve very much. He was my partner for life. Chad was more like a gym session or a relaxing massage. We never planned our meetings. We just let things happen. Of course, for a few months we'd see each other every couple of weeks, but then life got busy and 6 weeks went by without a chance to get together. That's when we started talking about taking a short cruise together. It seemed like a nice getaway for both of us, so after putting the kids to bed, I brought up the cruise idea with Steve. Honey, Edna at work won a Caribbean cruise for 2. She just broke up with her boyfriend and invited me over. What do you think? When does it happen? About 6 weeks in early June. And how long is it for Chad? I haven't discussed the details yet, so I think it's a 5-day trip. I can double check. That sounds like a great idea. You've been working really hard lately. I don't say it enough, but thank you for everything you do for our family. He hugged me tightly at that moment. I felt incredibly lucky. I loved him very much, so I led him into our bedroom and we made passionate love. When I was with Steve, I never thought about Chad. Steve was my reality. Chad was a temporary distraction. Chad and I chose June to give us time to discuss it with our spouses. I chose Edna because Steve hadn't met her, while Chad said his friend Jeremy had won the cruise. Neither Steve nor Sylvia objected, but it seemed that the 6 months we were waiting was too long. I'm not sure how Steve found out, but his behavior changed shortly thereafter, which made me wonder if he had orchestrated Kathy's near revelation of the surprise cruise plan, forcing Chad and me to board separately. Now I found myself staring at Steve's phone and his wedding ring, feeling completely lost as to what to do next. It seemed that I was headed for single motherhood, leaving little time for anything but taking care of the kids. If I thought life was hard before, it would probably be even harder without a partner by my side. Damn it, I took a deep breath and started making phone calls. I started with his brother Paul. "Hey Paul, did you see Steve today?" No, he was hesitant, seemed more reserved. Did he know something? Was he lying to me? I despise this uncertainty. All right, thanks. If he gets in touch, please ask him to call me. I had similar conversations with his parents, although they wondered why I wasn't on the cruise, and then with his sister, Beth, and his cousin, along with two of his closest friends. While I sensed they might know something, their responses didn't deviate too much from our usual interactions, so I chalked it up to my own nerves. When the kids came looking for me, I switched into mom mode until dinner time during another round of macaroni and cheese with baby carrots. Apparently my kids had a thing for orange food. Kathy asked, "Where's Daddy?" He said he was gonna be home this week. Well, plans change. Honey, I'm here now, but where's Daddy? He always comes home for dinner. Charlie, do you know where Daddy is? Charlie looked at me seriously and shook his head slowly. No, I believed him. Steve wouldn't want to worry the kids with something like that. I smiled and diverted their attention with questions about their summer camps, but inside, I was starting to panic. I pushed my anxiety aside, cleaned up the kitchen, and got the girls into the bathroom. It was after 8 when Kathy and Trixie were tucked in, and I let Charlie read in his room for another half hour until I returned to turn off his light. Staring at his phone, I knew I couldn't reach him that way, so I composed an email on my computer and sent it to both his personal and work accounts. My dearest Steve, I have hurt you deeply, and I'm truly sorry. In spite of everything, I love you and I want a chance to prove it to you. Please come home. I need you, and if not for me, then for our children. They were upset. You're missing dinner tonight, and they're only going to get more scared and worried the longer you're gone. Please come back to your family. I love you and only you. I stayed up late, hoping for an answer. Chad texted, but I blew him off around 10. I forced myself to bed, knowing I had to be awake for my children in the morning. I prayed for a word from Steve, but nothing came. Instead, I received a heated phone call from my sister-in-law. "What the hell is wrong with you?" She screamed when I picked up the phone. "What are you talking about?" "I mean, my brother may not always be the most organized, and he may forget half the stuff you ask for at the store because he refuses to write it down, but he's a good man. He's the best guy I know. So why are you messing with him?" "I don't understand." "What did he say to you?" "Steve didn't say anything to me. Paul had to bail him out of the drunk tank this morning. He was a mess. His lip was busted and his face was all scratched up. Paul thought he was still drunk, and he told Paul that you didn't love him anymore because you were fooling around with a coworker." My heart broke for Steve again. He wasn't much of a drinker, and when he did drink, he just got silly. Despite his size, he wasn't a fighter. He was gentle and always used words to solve problems. He'd never been in a fight, not in all those years. I'd known him, and there were no stories of fights from before. What had happened? What had I done? I have to find Steve. Is he with Paul? I don't know where he is, but geez, how could you cheat on the nicest guy ever? I didn't have an answer, so I said Trixie needed me and hung up. How could I cheat on Steve? The only explanation I could come up with was that I wasn't cheating on Steve. In my mind, my involvement with Chad had nothing to do with my marriage. I was fooling myself, I know, because a committed marriage requires total commitment all the time. No breaks, no escapes. It can be exhausting, but that bond must remain unbroken, or else everything falls apart, and you end up with chaos all around and relatives cursing you. It was crystal clear now that I had broken the wonderful man I loved. I had to find him to try to get me out of this mess. I called Paul, but he didn't answer, so I called his parents. I thought my conversation with his sister was tough, but I choose that a million times over compared to speaking with Steve's mother. Hello. Hi, Margaret. Is Steve there? All I heard was a sob, then silence. Margaret, are you okay? More silence. Are you there? Margaret? A trembling voice finally answered. I was thrilled when he met you. I thought you were the best for my son. He was so happy, but you turned out to be the worst shock. I waited for her to continue, but it seemed she had said all she needed to when the call ended abruptly. If Trixie hadn't walked in and asked me to tie a bow in her doll's dress, I might have collapsed right there, but I had my children to take care of. I forced a smile, and we got through the day. My children were innocent, and I knew I had to shield them from the truth for as long as possible. That proved to be another day. They became increasingly confused and upset about Steve's absence, so I had to explain to them that their father was staying with his brother. I tried to reassure them that he loved them very much, but that he and I had a disagreement and needed some time apart. They didn't like it at all, and Charlie seemed especially upset. Is Daddy coming home? Of course he is, honey. We just have to get some things straightened out, but he loves you and your sisters so much. He won't be gone long. Does he still love you? I hope so. I smiled, hiding how much his question hurt. Sometimes parents have disagreements, and we have to talk through them to be happy again. But even when we're mad at each other, we still love you. He nodded earnestly and walked away. My heart broke again as Steve's friends, and especially his family, rallied around him. My secret was out in the open. He was deeply hurt, but I couldn't even get a clue where he might be. His protectors stonewalled me when they couldn't avoid my calls. No one would give me any information about him. I left messages with the few who would talk to me, begging Steve to contact me or arrange to see the children. I sent him 2 or 3 emails a day, begging for forgiveness, declaring my love, asking for news of him, urging him to reach out to his children. I only let myself cry when the children couldn't hear me, but then I sobbed uncontrollably. His abandonment hurt me deeply, but what hurt most was how much I had hurt him. We had been so perfect together, and now everything had changed forever. 5 lives directly affected, and who knows how many others indirectly affected, and it was all my fault. By Thursday night, my hope was gone. I was out of ideas, resigned to waiting for Steve to make the first move, wondering when I would hear from him and hoping it wouldn't be through legal channels. I went to bed that night feeling more sad than ever that I seemed to have no advocate among the people who supported him. No one to plead for understanding, patience, and fairness. I didn't expect absolution, but I hoped he might still have enough love to at least respond in some way. Even anger would be preferable to silence, but all I heard was silence. The phone rang Friday afternoon and my heart raced until I saw the caller ID. I almost ignored it, but ever since Steve left, I had promised myself to face things head-on, even if they were unpleasant. Hey, Chad, Sylvia knows I got served with divorce papers. When I got off the boat today, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath to calm myself. Steve is gone. I have no idea where he could be. Damn it, how did they find out? I don't know, but I think Steve found out shortly after I mentioned the cruise to him. He's been acting weird for weeks, and that scene at the dock was a trap. He left me with the kids so I couldn't board the ship, and while I was waiting, he probably came home, packed, and left. Wow, I stayed calm and breathed slowly. How are you holding up? Do you want me to come over? That's not a good idea. Chad, I'm not blaming you, because I'm just as much to blame, but if I never see you again, that's fine with me. We can keep it professional at work, but other than that, please seriously stay away from me. Is that how you feel about me? I love my husband very much. I don't know why I went with you, but it cost me my future with Steve and my children. I don't want to be reminded of my mistakes. I understand. If you want to reconsider, just contact me. I don't turn away friends or even lovers. Goodbye, Chad. Lover seems to be how everyone else saw us, but I never felt that way about him, not even for a moment. My love was only for Steve, but Steve would never believe that again. The weekend was terrible. Steve was unreachable, and the kids were getting more and more upset. Trixie had 2 accidents Friday night, and Kathy had nightmares, so she slept with me Saturday. Charlie remained strong in the face of all the sadness, which made it even harder for me. I could feel his pain and confusion, and it wasn't hard to imagine that Steve felt the same way. He had to be hurting, and I was causing it. I wasn't just involved. I was the one causing it. He was the man I had promised to cherish, and I hurt him deeply and without hesitation. I once read that everyone is the hero of their own story. I'm the exception. I've been incredibly cruel to the person who should be most important to me. Instead, I've shown that I only care about myself. I wish I could run away and disappear where no one I know would ever find me. It wouldn't undo what I've done, but at least I wouldn't have to face the judgment I deserve every day. I couldn't avoid it. My children needed me no matter what was going on in my life. With Kathy snuggled next to me in our bed, I promised myself I'd be the best mom I could be, putting aside my own pain and regret to take care of them. Maybe I wouldn't be Steve's wife much longer, but I would be there for Charlie C. and little Trixie on Sunday mornings. Although I felt drained, I felt a newfound determination. I made waffles, bacon, and orange juice for the kids, then settled them in front of the TV. After cleaning up, I called Beth from the kitchen table. She was the only one of Steve's family to return my calls, although it seemed like she just wanted another chance to curse at me. "What the hell do you want now?" she snapped. "Good morning, Beth. I need you to tell Steve to go see his kids. They really need him. I know he doesn't want to see me, and that's hard, but I can handle it. But his children really need him. He needs to put aside his pain and reassure them that he loves them and that everything is going to be okay." "You're out of your mind. How can anything be okay after that?" I fought back tears and pulled myself together. "Steve will not be okay for a while. I may never be okay either, but damn it, our kids need to be okay and Steve needs to step up to make sure they are. I wish I hadn't acted so recklessly, and I'll always carry the guilt with me. But right now I'm putting that aside to take care of Charlie, Kathy, and Trixie, and they need Steve to do the same. I don't expect him to forgive me, but they need him now more than ever." "Screw you. He's been drunk since he left your house on Monday. You have no idea what you've done to him." My heart sank. I knew exactly what I'd done to him. I know that I have destroyed our marriage and hurt my husband deeply. If I could fix it by ending my life, I would, but that won't fix anything. Nothing can fix what's broken between us, but we can still make things right for our children. You, Paul, Margaret, and Richard have to help him see that. I wish I could be the one to do it, to still be his partner and help him through this. But he's got to figure it out on his own, just like I did. Our children are more important than anything else. You have to help him realize that there was a break." Then she spoke in a softer tone. "I'll talk to Paul, and the others and see what they say. Thank you, Beth. It may not seem like it, but I love Steve. I am deeply sorry for what I did. I don't even understand why I did it, but I did, and I have to live with it forever, knowing that I hurt the man I love. I'm not the person I thought I was. You're not the person we thought you were either. Her words stung, but I didn't cry. I felt numb inside. I focused on caring for my children, which helped keep the feelings of self-pity and regret at bay. At bay, I gathered my children in the family room and put on Encanto for them to watch again. After a trip to the park for a snack after the movie, we returned home for a quick lunch of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, apple slices, and milk. I put Trixie down for a nap, set Kathy up with crayons and a coloring book, and found Charlie engrossed in his airplane book with a moment of peace. I checked my phone. There were no calls or texts, but I knew what I had to do. Hi, Mom. Is Dad there? Hi, honey. Yeah, he's around here somewhere. What's going on? I need to talk to both of you. Sure, I think he's outside. Let me go find him. How are the kids? When are you and Steve bringing them over? That almost broke me. My resolve wavered, but I held on. That's actually what I need to talk about. Oh, are you all right? I need to talk to you and Dad. Well, he's right here. They struggled for about 40 seconds to figure out how to turn on the speaker, but they remained calm. Despite their repeated attempts, they were both relieved when they finally succeeded and praised each other for their skill. My parents loved each other very much. I envied that bond. What's on your mind, dear? I took a deep breath. I have something to tell you. Steve has left. He found out about my affair. I don't know what comes next, but I thought you should know that there was silence on the other end. Did you? Are you in love with somebody else? Mom asked. No, I said, choking back a sob. No, I love Steve. I love him deeply. I don't know why I was more silent. Is there a chance? Can the two of you work things out? I don't think so. Steve left on Monday, and he hasn't responded to anything. I've told him I have no idea where he is. His sister says he's devastated. He's been drinking all week. Oh, that poor man. My parents always adored Steve. I closed my eyes and calmed my breathing. I forced myself to go on. Yes, I know I'll always regret hurting him like this, but I may need help with the kids for a while until we figure things out. Whatever that may be, of course, dear, reach out anytime. They need us. Dad said the kids can stay with us whenever they need you, too. A parent's love never fades, even in disappointment. I fought back tears. Thank you. I love you both so much. We love you too. Dear, tears streamed down my face for what felt like hours after I hung up the phone. The truth hit me hard. I didn't deserve my parents, Steve, or my family, and yet they were all depending on me. I had to be strong for them. It was the only thing that kept me going. The idea that they might not love me anymore couldn't be my focus. I was needed, and that was enough to keep me going. Then the phone rang again. It was Beth. Steve wants to see the kids, she said without any preamble. Can you drop them off at our house in an hour? Sure, thanks, Beth. They miss him so much. I hope seeing the kids will give him something else to think about. He really needs something solid to hold on to right now. He's just falling apart. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I know he doesn't want me around, but if there's anything you think I can do, just say the word. In spite of everything, I still love him. I know I've lost my place in his life, but I'm here to help in any way he needs. Okay, the kids were thrilled to see Steve and excited to visit their grandparents' house. Kathy and Trixie ran ahead to the door, but Charlie hesitated. "Aren't you coming in?" "Not today. I have some errands to run, but I'll be back to pick you up in a couple of hours, okay?" He nodded earnestly as usual and walked hesitantly to the door, where Steve's mom was waiting with open arms. She didn't even look in my direction. I went back home and cried again. The house felt suffocating yet desolate. Everything seemed smaller, compressed, devoid of meaning. The family photos mocked me. They seemed old and stiff relics of another era, as if they could have been photographed. The furniture, books, DVDs, and video games all resembled artifacts from a bygone era. It felt like I was visiting my family's museum, watching history unfold. I gathered my strength as best I could before returning to pick up the children. I hardly recognized them. They were all subdued as Steve's mother walked them out the door and to my car, and they remained unusually quiet on the ride home. When we got back, I prepared dinner. I cooked a chicken stir-fry, baked some frozen French fries, and sliced a red bell pepper and some baby carrots. I adored my children, but their culinary preferences were limited and focused on carbohydrates. It would be some time before I challenged that for now. They needed comfort. No one ate much. Charlie retired to his room while I settled Kathy and Trixie in front of the TV so I could clean up the kitchen. Just as I finished, I noticed Kathy standing in the doorway watching me. "Mommy," "Yes, sweetie, why is Daddy so sad?" "What do you mean, Angel?" "He was crying a lot." "I think he was just happy to see you." "Sometimes people cry when they're happy." "You know he loves you very much." "I know he said that, but then he cried some more." I held my child and struggled once again with waves of regret. I had shattered Steve's world. My love for him was the foundation of the life he had built, and when that foundation crumbled, everything else came crashing down. He couldn't even control his emotions around his children. I knew he would heal eventually, but to what extent was uncertain. I loved Steve. I was sure of that with every fiber of my being, and I had hurt him deeply. Maybe I could heal him. I knew him better than he knew himself, but he didn't want to give me that chance, and I couldn't blame him. But I couldn't bear to see him suffer. He didn't deserve it, and my children didn't deserve a father who was hurting. My own father always taught me that if you break something, you fix it. So that's what I had to do. I couldn't make Steve the same man he was before. He was before my mistake, but I could certainly make him better than he was now, with or without his cooperation. I had two resources to work with. One was our children. The other was my deep understanding of him. "Children, you know how sad your father is." They all nodded. "Well, I have some ideas about how to cheer him up." "I want to hear them." Their enthusiasm almost brought tears to my eyes. They were incredible kids, and they adored their dad. "What does your father like to do to tickle me?" Trixie exclaimed, making us all laugh. "He likes to watch videos with us." Kathy chimed in. "He loves ice cream." Trixie added. I smiled. Maybe I needed to give them some guidance. "He really loves fishing," Charlie said quietly. "Yes, he loves each of you so much, and he loves to go fishing." "What else does he like?" "Working in the garden," Charlie added again. "That's true." "Do you think he'd be happy if he could do some of those things with the people he loves the most?" They all nodded eagerly, their eyes wide with excitement. "I think he'd really appreciate it if you offered to do some of his favorite things with him." "Can you do that the next time you see him?" "When is he coming home?" Mommy, I don't know Angel, but you'll see him at Poppy and Grandma's very soon. Now, who wants to go to the bathroom first? After the girls were in bed and Charlie was reading in his room, I called Beth. What do you want? She said in a tired voice. Haven't you done enough? I know what I have done. Beth and Steve didn't deserve any of this, but now he has to put our children first. They need him, and he needs them. We can help him begin to heal, and it starts with him spending time with the children. Why what? Why are you doing this? You destroyed my brother, and now you want to help him. I never wanted to hurt him. In spite of everything, I love Steve very much. I've always loved him. I know we can't be together now, maybe ever, and that breaks my heart, but I know how we can heal, and I'll do my best to help, even if he never speaks to me again. I was surprised that Beth had nothing to say, so I continued. I want him to see the children every day. It can be at your parents' house or here, but it would be best if I left while he's here. Maybe we can even share this house 1 week on, 1 week off. That way the kids will stay in their familiar surroundings. The children will help ground him, and their love will help him recover. He's going to divorce you. That was like a knife in my chest. I hesitated, but I accepted it. I deserved it. I thought so, and I will grieve for a very long time, but that doesn't change what we have to do to help him. Please, Beth, help me help him. All right, I'll encourage him to see the children. I'll talk to Paul and our folks about your idea of sharing your house. It makes sense to me, but only if you're not there when he is. I'll do anything but give up my children. I don't want to hurt him any more than I already have. She hung up without another word, which I took as progress, considering how likely that word would have been an F-bomb. The next day at work felt weird. I switched tasks with Edna so I wouldn't have to be around Chad. We were both on edge around each other, but to everyone else it seemed like business as usual. Edna asked me about the cruise, laughing about Steve's confusion about her going with me. He had contacted her for some gifts while I was away and mistakenly thought she was going on the trip with me. I forced a smile, hiding my inner turmoil, and explained that I ended up not going because of the kids. She praised Steve for being such a caring husband, which only made me burst into tears when I was alone in the bathroom. I picked up the kids on the way home and put them to bed. I knew I was relying too much on TV to keep the girls occupied, but I'd work on that. Once things settled down, I couldn't find the energy for our usual games and activities. Our meals weren't elaborate, but I had tried to introduce healthier options, like adding mashed spinach to spaghetti sauce. Tonight, though, it was just frozen pizza and apple slices. When Beth called, I took a deep breath before answering the phone. Steve mentioned that he wanted to see the kids. He thought it would be a good idea for the two of you to split time at the house. I made it sound like it was my idea, in case he ever spoke to you again. It wouldn't have gone over well if he knew it was your suggestion. Thank you, Beth. I don't care about taking credit. Our priority is to get Steve, Charlie, Kathy, and Trixie together so they can heal as much as possible. What time does he want to start tomorrow? Knowing he's going to be a single parent to the kids? For a week, he seemed to calm down. He didn't have any alcohol. Today he's still very sad, but focusing on the children helps him. I appreciate your help with this. Beth, don't mention it. I mean it to me too. If you ever mention this to Steve, he'll be mad at me. I let out a bitter laugh. It was either that or burst into tears again. This was a colossal mistake, wasn't it? I couldn't have ruined my family more if I tried. Beth was silent, but I could hear the tension in her voice. Finally, she spoke. Why did this happen? I'm not sure. It felt like a break from reality. Chad was friendly and all, but I didn't have any real feelings for him. I wasn't particularly attracted to him. He just enjoyed being with me for who I am, not as a wife or a mother. It was as if he valued my company. The physical part happened unexpectedly, but it wasn't passionate. It was just something we did for fun. I was risking my marriage for what was basically just hanging out at the gym and going on a damn cruise. I have no idea what I was thinking. I mentally separated Chad from the rest of my life, and now that I look back on it, I'm disgusted. It's like it didn't happen to me, but it also feels like a surreal dream, and now I have to live with the knowledge that I hurt the man I truly love over something that meant nothing to me. It's messed up. I know. There was silence again. Yoon talked to a lawyer. You'll be served with divorce papers at work sometime this week. Yeah, well, I kind of saw that coming. The whole situation is messed up. I couldn't agree more. I worked up the courage to tell everyone at work that Steve and I were separating. I admitted that most of the problems were my fault. Everyone seemed shocked, except Chad, who pretended to be surprised. I wanted to be the one to break the news before rumors spread, even though I knew people would put it together once they heard about Chad's own marital problems. It was awkward at first, but 2 of the dentists offered support and promised to adjust my hours as needed. Their kindness encouraged others to offer support as well. The divorce papers arrived on Thursday afternoon, and I took them to my parents' house, where I was staying while Steve had the children. Steve's demands and the petition were very harsh. He wanted the lion's share of our assets, the house, primary custody of all 3 children, child support from me, no alimony from him, and for me to go back to my maiden name. I understood his anger and felt sorry for him again, but his proposed settlement wasn't going to work for him as much as it was for me. I knew him well. Once he calmed down, he'd probably regret such a bitter agreement. Besides, if we wanted our children to come out of this divorce as emotionally intact as possible, they needed to see us treating each other with kindness. During my meeting with my attorney, I insisted on a fair proposal and made it clear that I wasn't interested in protracted negotiations. I accepted the fact that my marriage was over. I understood that I had no right to demand anything from Steve, although I did want to talk to him. We communicated through his attorney and agreed that I would only get involved if Steve requested it. He never did. I refrained from making any claims on his business and proposed an equal division of our remaining assets. Shared use of the house on alternate weeks until our youngest child graduated from high school, joint custody of the children. No child support from either of us and no spousal support either. I was willing to keep his last name until our youngest graduated from high school, but I'd reconsider if he still wanted it. Then my attorney thought I could negotiate for more, but I stood my ground. While Steve's attorney made a few attempts to secure additional benefits for him, he knew I could push for more as well. Eventually, we settled on the terms I had originally proposed. Living in our house without each other felt strange to me, but the kids, especially the girls, adjusted pretty quickly, which was the main goal. Charlie seemed more preoccupied than usual, so Steve and I, with Beth's help, decided to get him into therapy. He responded positively, and while he'd never be the life of the party, he went from being serious all the time back to his pre-divorce self. Beth handled the weekly transition smoothly, arriving half an hour before the change so that one of us could be gone when the other arrived, although Steve didn't speak to me. He always took the high road with the kids. Well, almost always, he would take down any pictures with me in them and turn them to face the wall in the den. I'd put them back up during the week and then take them down before I went back to my parents' house. He never said anything negative about me to the kids, and he made sure his family didn't either. I respected his boundaries. I owed him a lot more, but that's all he allowed me to do for him. I went to the office full time, and my parents would pick up the kids and stay with them until I got home during the week. It wasn't a complete life, but I had my kids, my parents, and my job, all of which I enjoyed. I refused to date, and I had no idea if Steve was dating or not. I suspected he was. He thrived in relationships and was a great partner. The first time Steve spoke to me since that terrible day on the dock was at Kathy's school play. I waited until he and his parents chose their seats, then sat on the other side of the big room behind them, so he wouldn't see me directly. Trixie was with me. Charlie was with a friend at night when she saw her dad after the show. She ran over to him. I followed a few steps behind and stopped a few feet away as he picked her up and blew a raspberry on her cheek, making her squeal with laughter. I smiled, seeing their bond on display. His eyes quickly found me. He always did that when we were a couple, and he nodded at me. I smiled back at him. I still loved him, even though I knew we couldn't be together. We thought we'd take Kathy out for ice cream to celebrate her play. Can I drop her off later? I had the same idea, but I'd give in to him now. Sure, why not take Trixie too? He offered a half smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Thanks, we won't be long. I'll go tell Kathy to meet you in front of the stage. I have to get her costume. She played a manta ray, and I thought she did a fantastic job. Okay, he turned around with Trixie in his arms and walked with his parents to the front of the stage, and that was it. I didn't feel any love, but I didn't feel any tension either. It seemed that he had put my betrayal behind him. I felt both relieved and sad. He would probably move on to someone else soon. I walked into the classroom and found Kathy chatting excitedly with some friends dressed as a lobster and a shark. You were amazing, Mommy. I was so nervous, I bet, but you did great here. Give me your costume. Daddy's outside by the stage with Grammy and Poppy, and they're taking you and Trixie out for ice cream. Yay, are you coming too? Not tonight. I have to go home and clean up the kitchen. We had to leave in a hurry after dinner. I made sure Kathy got over to Steve and his parents. They made a big fuss over her, which made me smile. The kids looked like they were doing well. I felt a lump in my throat as I walked away. There would be happiness for both Steve and me, but probably not together, and not nearly as much as I had sacrificed with my foolishness. I said a little prayer for Steve to find love again. He was the innocent caught up in this mess, and he deserved his happiness, but now he had to find it for himself, and so did I.